"Don't make a sound," the Mafia boss after stepping into my apartment. She whispered words I'll never forget. The door was already open. Mara stood in the hallway with her keys in her hand, and her heart already moving too fast. The door to her apartment was not wide open. It was not kicked in. It was just pushed slightly away from the frame. A thin line of darkness visible between the door and the wall, the kind of gap that meant someone had pulled it behind them without letting the latch catch. She had not left it like that. She never left it like that. Mara had lived in this building for 2 years, and she had developed habits the way people who have survived difficult things develop habits, quietly and completely, so that they became part of who she was without her noticing. She always locked the door. She always checked the handle twice. She always made sure. She stood in the hallway for 4 seconds. She counted them. Then she reached into her bag and turned off the sound on her phone without looking down at it. The building was quiet. It was past 11 at night, and the neighbors on her floor were a retired couple who went to bed before 9, and a young man who worked early shifts at the hospital and was rarely home. The hallway smelled like it always did, a little like old carpet and the faint ghost of someone's cooking from hours ago. Mara pushed the door open with the tips of her fingers. She did not turn the light on. She stood in the doorway and let her eyes adjust, and she listened. Her apartment was small, a kitchen and living area that shared a space, a short hallway, a bedroom, a bathroom. She knew every sound it made when it was empty, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of traffic from 3 floors below, the tick of the old radiator near the window, which she had never once successfully turned off. She heard something else. Not a sound exactly. More like the weight of the room being different, the air not moving quite right. Someone was in the kitchen. She should have left. She knew, with the clear, cold part of her brain that had always worked even when the rest of her was struggling, that the correct thing to do was step back into the hallway, walk to the stairwell, go to the street, call someone. That was the correct sequence. She stepped inside instead. Later, she would not be able to explain it, except to say that something in her already knew. Not who was there, not why. But that running was not the answer this time. That whatever was waiting for her in the kitchen already knew her name, already knew her address, already knew enough about her life that running down the hallway would only delay the conversation. She crossed the living area in the dark. She knew every step. She did not make a sound. The kitchen was to the left. She stopped at the entrance. In the chair at her small kitchen table, the one she used to pile her work onto and eat standing up beside, sat a man. He was tall even sitting down. She could see that much. He was sitting with his hands resting on the table, not gripping anything, not reaching for anything, completely still in the way that very few people managed without effort. He was wearing dark clothing, and there was something on the left side of his jacket that was darker than the rest. He had not turned on the light. He had not turned it on because light in the window at this hour would have been visible from the street. He knew the building the same way she did. Mara reached for the light switch. "I would rather you did not," the man said. His voice was low and even, not threatening, not soft. It occupied the space in the room the way a piece of heavy furniture occupied space. It was simply there. "This is my apartment," Mara said. "I know," he said. "I apologize for being here." She had not expected that. She had not expected anything he had said in the last 10 seconds, and her mind was running the same short loop it ran when something completely outside her predictions occurred, trying to recalibrate, trying to find the edge of the situation. "How did you get in?" she asked. "The lock is not a strong one," he said. "You should replace it. I want you to leave." "I will," he said. "I just need a few minutes." "I am going to turn the light on," she said. He did not answer. She turned the light on. What she saw stopped her completely. The man at her table was perhaps 35, with dark hair and a face that had been handsome in a sharp, defined way before something had rearranged parts of it over the years. A jaw that had been broken and healed slightly off-center. A scar along the left side of his neck that disappeared beneath his collar. His eyes were gray, not blue-gray or green-gray, simply gray, the color of concrete on an overcast morning, and they were very calm. The dark patch on the left side of his jacket was blood. Not a little blood. He had pressed the fabric of his shirt against it, and the shirt had done what it could, but the jacket was soaked through on that side, and there was a thin line of it reaching the chair beneath him. "You are bleeding," Mara said. "Yes," he said. You broke into my apartment because you are bleeding. I broke into your apartment, he said, because I had no other option within the next 3 minutes. And your apartment was the closest available one. And I know your name, and I know that you will not panic. She looked at him. You know my name. Mara Ellison, he said. You have lived here for 2 years. You were born in a town called Ardwick in the north of England, and you moved here after the trial. You work as a freelance translator. You speak 4 languages. You do not have any family in this city. The word trial hit her, the way it always hit her when someone said it, like a door being closed in a room you were standing in. She felt it. She did not show it. Who are you? She asked. He looked at her for a moment. He seemed to be deciding something. My name is Owen, he said. Just that. One name. No last name. No explanation. He said it the way someone states a fact that they know is incomplete and are choosing not to finish. Mara had grown up in a town where certain names were said quietly, if they were said at all. She had grown up knowing that some men had only one name in conversation, and that was because giving the full name was a kind of declaration of where you stood. She had understood this by the time she was 12 years old. She understood it now. She walked to the cabinet under the sink and opened it. She kept a first aid kit there. She had always kept one, even in her previous flat, even in the room she had rented when she first left home. Old habit. It had seemed practical. She was not surprised to find it useful now. She set it on the table. Take the jacket off, she said. He looked at the kit and then at her. Something moved in his expression. It was not surprise exactly. It was something closer to recalibration, the same thing she had felt when he did not match her expectations. You are not afraid, he said. I am deciding what to be, she said. Take the jacket off. He did. Slowly, because the left side hurt him, though he controlled the pain with the same completeness with which he controlled everything else. Beneath the jacket was a dark shirt, and beneath the dark shirt, when she cut it away with the scissors from the kit, was a wound in his left side, just below the ribs. Not deep enough to have reached anything that would have killed him already, but serious enough that he had not had a safe, controlled option for dealing with it, and had ended up in her chair at 11 at night, bleeding on her kitchen floor in a slow, patient way. She cleaned it, and closed it with the steri strips from the kit. She had taken a first aid course 3 years ago and another one 18 months after that, because she had known after the trial that the world she existed in adjacent to was a world where knowing how to do this might matter. He did not make a sound while she worked. When she was done, she straightened up and looked at him. You said you know why I will not panic, she said. Tell me what that means. He considered. It means you have been close to situations like this before, he said. Not this exactly, but close enough that the sight of blood and the need for a practical decision does not stop you. Mara thought about her brother, Danny. She thought about the 18 months before the trial and the courtroom and the years since. She thought about how much of that Owen, with his one name and his calm gray eyes, already knew. You have 30 minutes, she said. Then you are going to leave. He nodded. She put the kettle on because she needed something to do with her hands. She made 2 cups of tea without asking him if he wanted one. She set one in front of him and took the other to the far side of the table and sat down. They did not speak for a few minutes. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street below. Owen's eyes moved to the window and back without any change in his expression, but Mara had watched people carefully her entire adult life, and she caught the movement. Are they looking for you? She said. They will be, he said. They are not here yet. How long do you have? Enough, he said. She did not find that reassuring. She did not say so. He picked up the tea and held it with both hands and drank it, and for one strange moment he looked like any other person sitting at a kitchen table at night, tired and in pain, and glad to be somewhere warm. Then the moment passed. I will not bring anything here that follows me, he said. When I leave cleanly. You will not hear from anyone. You cannot promise that, she said. He met her eyes. No, he said. I cannot. She respected him for saying it. She drank her tea. He drank his. The radiator ticked. The refrigerator hummed. At some point she became aware that he was watching her with an attention that was not threatening but was complete. The attention of someone who reads people the way she read languages, fitting the pieces together until the meaning revealed itself. You are thinking about whether to ask, he said. She was. She had been thinking about whether to ask since the moment he said the word trial, and she had filed the question away, and now it was still there, waiting. "Your brother's case," she said. "You mentioned that you know I came here after the trial. You mean Danny's trial." He did not confirm or deny it with words. He simply held her gaze, which was its own kind of answer. "Do you know Danny?" she said. He set down the tea. He looked at the table for a moment, and then back at her, and she understood from that pause alone that the answer to the question was not yes or no, but something more complicated. "Go to sleep on the couch," she said. He looked at her. "You cannot leave yet," she said. "You know that and I know that. Whatever is outside is still outside. You can leave when it is safe to leave, and until then you will stay on the couch, and in the morning we will figure out what comes next." She stood up and took both cups to the sink. She rinsed them. She put them on the rack. She got a pillow and a blanket from the cupboard in the hallway and set them on the couch without looking at him. She went to her bedroom and closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. Her hands were not shaking. She noticed this. She was not sure what it meant about her. She was not sure it meant anything good. Through the closed door she heard nothing. Not a sound from the couch, not a sound from the kitchen. Owen was either already asleep or sitting in the dark, being as quiet as a room that was empty. She lay down without taking her shoes off. She stared at the ceiling. Danny, she thought. She had not spoken his name out loud in 4 months. She had been very careful not to. She had been careful about a great many things. She was not sure, lying there in the dark with a stranger on her couch who knew her full name and her history and the things she kept filed away behind the loose panel in the closet, whether careful was going to be enough anymore. She did not sleep for a long time. When she did, it was not easy sleep. It was the thin, watchful sleep of someone who has always kept one ear open, who has never fully let their guard down in any place, who has learned that safety is a thing you maintain, not a thing you arrive at. Outside the window, the city went on being itself, indifferent and enormous, and full of people with their own dangerous things happening quietly behind closed doors. The morning came gray and slow, the kind of morning where the light does not seem to arrive so much as seep in around the edges of the curtains, and Mara was already awake before it got there. She lay still for a moment. She listened. The apartment was not making the sounds an empty apartment makes. She got up. She did not take a long time about it. She had gone to sleep in her clothes, and she smoothed them and opened the bedroom door. Owen was not on the couch. The blanket and pillow were folded neatly and left at one end. A small, deliberate action that she did not know what to do with. She walked to the kitchen. He was standing at the counter with his back to her. He had found the coffee and made it. The kitchen smelled like a normal morning in a way that was so at odds with what had happened the night before that it created a strange doubling feeling, as if her ordinary life had just continued, and last night had been something she had imagined, except for the bandaging supplies still on the table and the small rust-colored mark on the kitchen floor that she was going to have to clean. "You made coffee," she said. "I hope that is acceptable," he said, without turning around. "It is my coffee," she said. He turned. He had taken his ruined shirt off at some point and was wearing the dark jacket over the bandaging. His face in daylight looked different than it had in the kitchen light at night. The angles were harder. The gray eyes were sharper. He looked like a man who had been awake for a long time and had decided that sleep was something he could afford to want but not to need. "How is the wound?" she said. "Manageable," he said. She poured herself a cup of coffee. She stood at the other side of the kitchen and drank it, and looked at him. "You said last night that you know about my brother," she said. "I am going to need more than that." He leaned against the counter. He crossed his arms carefully, favoring the left side. "I said I know about the trial," he said. "Those are different things." "They are not different things to me," she said. He was quiet for a moment. The way he was quiet was particular, not empty but full. The silence of someone who is choosing each word before they speak it. "The case was closed," he said. "Your brother was convicted on testimony from one witness and supporting documentation that was, at the time, considered complete." "I know what the case was," she said. "I was there." "I know you were," he said. "I also know the documentation was not complete. I know there is a piece of it that was never submitted, that was actively removed before the trial. I know who removed it." The coffee cup was warm in her hands. She held it with both hands. She looked at him. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because you need to know it," he said. "And because I need something from you." There it was. She had been waiting for it. She had known from the moment she turned the light on last night that there would be a point at which he told her what this was actually about. She had been holding herself slightly apart from the conversation, the way she held herself apart from languages while she was still learning them, listening without committing. "What do you need?" she said. "There is a man," Owen said. "He is connected to the same network that your brother was charged with operating as part of. The difference is that your brother was not actually part of it. This man was. This man is still operating. He has something I need." "What does this have to do with me?" "You speak several languages," he said, "including one that almost no one in this city speaks. A regional dialect. Very specific. This man uses a go-between who speaks only this dialect and one other, and the communications between them have never been intercepted, because no one on our side can translate them in real time." Mara set the coffee cup down very carefully. She understood languages the way some people understood music, not just the words and grammar, but the shape underneath them, the way meaning shifted depending on the speaker's region and class and emotional state. She had spent 7 months working on a translation project in a country that spoke the dialect Owen was describing, and she had been good at it. Good enough that the project lead had told her she had a quality that was rarer than fluency. She had instinct. She had not used it since she came back. "You want me to translate," she said. "I want you to listen," he said, "in real time, when we need it. There will be a meeting, possibly 2. You would not be visible. You would not be in any room where you could be identified." She looked at him for a long moment. The light was still gray outside the window. Somewhere down the hall she heard the neighbor's door close, the sound of ordinary life continuing. "You said you know who removed the documentation from Danny's case," she said. "I do," he said. "Is it the same man?" He met her eyes. "Yes," he said. Mara was quiet. She was running the numbers that were not numbers, the kind of calculation that happens in a part of the mind that does not use words, that simply weighs things against each other in the dark. "If you get what you need from this man," she said slowly, "what happens to the information about Danny's case?" "That depends on what we find," he said. "But I will tell you this. I do not leave things half done. I do not use people and discard what they have given me." "That is not a promise," she said. "No," he said, "it is not. I will not make you a promise I may not be able to keep." The second time he had said that to her, she was beginning to understand it as a pattern, a kind of code he lived by, a precision about commitment that came from a world where a broken promise had real consequences. She picked up her coffee cup again. She drank the rest of it, cool now and slightly bitter. "I need to think," she said. "You have time," he said, "but not very much of it." She nodded and turned toward the hallway. Then she stopped. "The man who had the documentation removed," she said, without turning back. "His name, do you know it?" "Yes," Owen said. She stood in the hallway entrance. She waited. He said the name. Mara stood completely still. She had heard that name once before, in a whispered conversation she was not supposed to have overheard, in the house where her brother's things had been packed up after the verdict. She had been standing in the hallway, the way she was standing in a hallway now, and she had heard someone say that name, and then stop themselves. She had filed it away. She was very good at filing things away. "All right," she said. She walked to the bedroom and opened the closet and crouched down and pressed the loose panel in the back wall. Behind it was a file. 40 pages, thick with court transcripts and case numbers, and the note she had written herself on the very last page in her own handwriting. The list of things that had never added up, the gaps in the evidence, the single name she had heard whispered and never been able to place. She had been keeping it for 3 years. She stood up with it in her hands and walked back to the kitchen and set it on the table between them. Owen looked at it. He looked at her. "I have been doing my own research," she said. "You should probably know what I already have." Something shifted in his expression then. Not surprise. Something older than surprise. Something that looked, for just a moment, like the kind of relief that comes when a person who has been carrying something alone for too long discovers they are not, in fact, alone. He pulled out the chair and sat down. She sat across from him. They opened the file. Outside, the city was fully awake now. Cars moving on the street. Voices somewhere below. The unremarkable sounds of a world that did not know or care what was being decided at a small kitchen table on the 3rd floor. The radiator had finally stopped its ticking, and the refrigerator hummed steadily, and the light came in through the window and lay flat and gray across the pages between them. Mara thought about Danny sitting in a room with a number on the door, 3 years gone now, 2 still left to serve, and she thought about how she had promised herself when the verdict came in that she would not stop, that she would keep looking, that she would find the piece that was missing even if it took the rest of her life. She had not expected the missing piece to find her first. She pointed to the name she had written at the bottom of her note page. Owen looked at it. He looked at her. "Where did you hear that?" he said. "I am not the only one who knows how to find things," she said. It was not entirely an answer. He did not push. He simply looked at the name she had written, and then he looked out the window for a moment, and she could see him doing the same kind of calculation she had been doing all morning, adding what she had to what he had, finding where the edges matched. "This changes what I need from you," he said. "I thought it might," she said. "It is more complicated than I described. I understood that when you said his name this morning," she said. He turned back to her. The gray eyes were steady. "Are you still willing?" Mara looked at the file on the table. She looked at Owen. She thought about her brother. "Tell me everything," she said. He did. They sat at the kitchen table for 2 more hours. Owen talked and she listened, and she asked questions that he answered with the precision of a man who had thought through every detail. By the end of it, she had a picture in her mind that was more complete than anything she had built in 3 years of working alone. The man they were discussing was named Harlan Cole. He was English, which had surprised people when they first became aware of him, because the organizations he worked with were not English, and most people assumed he was simply a go-between, a facilitator, someone who moved money and information across borders in exchange for a percentage. What very few people knew was that Harlan Cole was not a facilitator. He was a principal. He had been building his position for 12 years, quietly, in the gap between the attention of one set of authorities and another, in the space that existed between jurisdictions. Danny had worked for a company that moved goods across borders. The company had been entirely legitimate. Danny had been entirely legitimate. Harlan Cole had used that company's logistics infrastructure, without the company's knowledge, to move certain other things alongside the legitimate cargo. And when the infrastructure was discovered and investigated, the trail had been carefully prepared to end at Danny and not continue to Cole. Mara had known most of this. She had suspected all of it, seeing Owen confirm it, detail by detail, without hesitation, without any of the hedging or softening she had encountered from lawyers and investigators who had not wanted to commit to what they could not yet prove, was like having a room she had been sitting in, with bad light finally lit up properly. It was almost too much to look at. "The documentation that was removed," she said. "What was it?" "A communication," Owen said. "A written communication from Cole to the person who ran the logistics company, sent before the investigation began, before any of it came to light. It established Cole's knowledge of what the infrastructure was being used for. More than that, it established his authorship of the plan. And it disappeared before trial. It was found," Owen said, "and then it was not found." "Who found it?" "The investigating officer," he said. "His name does not matter now. What matters is that he was reached before it could be submitted." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Reached," she said. "Paid," Owen said, "and when payment was not sufficient, threatened." She looked out the window. A pigeon had landed on the fire escape outside and was moving along the railing in the methodical, pointless way pigeons moved, and she watched it for a moment, because it was easier to look at than the information sitting on the table between them. "The communication," she said. "Does it still exist?" "That," Owen said, "is what we need." She looked back at him. "You think Cole still has it?" "I think Cole has never destroyed anything that could be used," Owen said. "He keeps leverage. That is how he has survived as long as he has. He has documentation on every person he has ever dealt with, and he keeps it in a form he can access, and they cannot. So you need to find where he keeps it," she said. "We know where he keeps it," Owen said. "We need to access it, and to access it, we need to be present at a meeting where it will be moved. Cole is careful. He does not communicate through channels that can be monitored. He communicates through face-to-face conversations in dialect, using a translator he trusts. The translator is the only one who can be in the room besides Cole and his associate." "You want me to be the translator," she said. "I want you to replace his translator," Owen said. "Temporarily, Just for one meeting, long enough to confirm the location and the access details. Mara thought about this. She thought about it carefully, turning it from all sides, the way she turned a difficult text when she was working, looking for the weakness in the structure, the place where it did not hold. His translator, she said. What happens to his translator? She will be somewhere else, Owen said. Not harmed, simply occupied elsewhere long enough. And Cole, does he know what his translator looks like? He has never met her, Owen said. They communicate through an intermediary. Cole trusts the intermediary. The intermediary can be managed. By you, Mara said. By people I work with, Owen said. She drummed her fingers on the table once, a single small tap, and stopped herself. When is this meeting? 3 days, he said. Possibly 4. And Danny, she said, if this works, if we find the documentation, what then? Owen looked at her steadily. Then we use it, he said, properly, through the right channels, in a way that cannot be buried this time. You have those channels, she said. Yes, he said. She was quiet for a long moment. I need to know something, she said. Not about the plan, about you. He waited. Danny's case, she said, finding the documentation, removing Cole from the picture. Is that what this is about for you? Or is that a side effect of what this is about for you? He considered the question seriously, which she appreciated. She had learned that a person who answers without pause to a question like that is usually not answering the real question. Cole has done things that affect many people, Owen said. Your brother is one of them. He is not the only one. What I want from Cole is larger than Danny, but what I want from Cole and what you want from Cole are the same thing, the documentation, the truth of what he did. Why are you being honest with me about that? She said. He seemed almost surprised by the question. Because you would find out, he said simply, and because you deserve to know what you are walking into. Mara pushed her chair back and stood up. She walked to the window and looked down at the street. The morning was fully in now, people on the pavement below, a delivery van double parked, the ordinary movement of a city going about its ordinary business. She thought about Danny's face at the sentencing. She thought about the 3 years she had spent in this apartment with the file behind the panel and the list of things that did not add up. She thought about the moment when the verdict was read out and the feeling that had moved through her then, not grief exactly, but a tearing, as if something fundamental had been rearranged. She had promised herself she would not stop. 3 days, she said. Yes, Owen said. She turned from the window. Then we need to prepare. The next 2 days moved with a compressed intensity that Mara had only ever felt before in the weeks leading up to the trial. It was not that things happened fast exactly. It was that everything that happened mattered, and when everything matters, time collapses inward. Owen did not stay in the apartment. He left that first morning through the fire escape and across the roof to the adjacent building, which Mara would later learn he had already mapped before he ever arrived at her door. He came back in the evenings, through the same route, and they worked at the kitchen table until late. He brought information, she brought language. The dialect Cole's go-between used was a compressed, heavily regionalized form of a language Mara had spent 7 months immersed in. It was not a form that appeared in textbooks or language courses. It was the kind of language that existed in small communities, that had absorbed local words and dropped formal structures over generations until it had become something almost private. She could speak it. She could think in it. She could follow it at full conversational speed, which was not a common ability even among people who spoke the standard form of the language. She spent the first evening going through the context. Owen had recordings, short ones, never more than a few seconds, clearly obtained through considerable effort. She listened to them on his phone with one earpiece in, sitting at the table while he went through maps and building plans on the other side. The voice on the recordings was a woman named Petra. She was approximately 40 based on the voice. She spoke the dialect with the ease of someone who had grown up in it. Her speech patterns were distinctive. Certain consonants dropped, certain vowels stretched, a particular phrasing she used for confirmation, a 4-word phrase that was not quite grammatically standard, but was the way people in that specific region actually spoke. Mara learned Petra the way she had always learned difficult texts, not by memorizing but by understanding. She found the logic underneath the patterns. She found the reasons for the deviations. She let the voice become familiar until she could hear it in her own head without playing the recording. On the evening of the second day, Owen said, "Do it." She spoke 3 sentences in the dialect, approximating Petra's voice, Petra's cadence, the dropped consonants and the stretched vowels and the 4-word confirmation phrase. Owen was quiet for a moment. "That is very good," he said. "It is close," she said. "It is not exact." Cole has never heard Petra in person, he said. He has spoken to her through an intermediary. What he expects is the language and the confirmation phrase. You have both. "And if something goes wrong," she said. "Then we adapt," he said. She had begun to understand that this was the closest thing Owen had to a plan B. Not a specific alternative, but a belief in real-time adjustment, a confidence in his own ability to read a room and change the parameters before the parameters changed him. She was not sure if this was recklessness or a very high form of competence. She suspected it was both. On the morning of the 3rd day, a message came through on the phone Owen used for his people, not the one he had used to play the recordings. He read it and put the phone down and looked at her. "Tonight," he said. She had been expecting it, but the word still landed with weight. "All right," she said. She went to the bedroom and changed. She wore dark clothes and flat shoes, and she pulled her hair back. She was not trying to look like Petra. She was trying to look like no one in particular. She was trying to look like the kind of person whose appearance you might try to remember afterward and find you could not quite. She had learned how to do this years ago, in the period after the trial when she had needed to move through certain spaces without being noticed. She had become good at it. It was a skill she had hoped she would never use again. She picked up her coat from the back of the bedroom door and went to the kitchen. Owen was standing at the window. He was looking at the street below with the same complete stillness he had had in the kitchen that first night, the stillness of a man who was already inside the next few hours in his mind, running them through. He turned when she came in. He looked at her for a moment, then he said, "Are you ready?" She thought about Danny. She thought about the file. She thought about 3 years. "Yes," she said. They left through the fire escape. The building they were going to was in a part of the city that had been redeveloped twice in the last decade and had the particular anonymity of places that have been remade so many times that they have lost any sense of what they originally were. Glass fronts, new paving, everything clean enough to suggest that nothing interesting had ever happened there. Owen moved through the streets with the ease of someone who had memorized them. He did not look at his phone. He did not hesitate at corners. He walked at a pace that was just below the pace that attracted attention, and she walked beside him and matched it. They did not speak. There was a team. She was aware of this without being introduced to them. At one point, a man fell into step briefly beside Owen and murmured something she did not catch, and then peeled off into a side street. At another point, a woman in a doorway made brief eye contact with Owen and gave a small nod. She did not acknowledge Mara. Mara was aware that she was the unknown variable in the evening's events, the piece that had not been part of the original structure. She did not let this unsettle her. The meeting was in a restaurant, not a private room, a table in the far corner of a restaurant that was busy enough for noise cover, but not so busy that extra faces were remarkable. Cole would arrive with 2 people. The associate who spoke only the dialect would arrive separately. Mara's role was to be present as the translator, seated between them, there to bridge the language gap. The intermediary who had arranged the meeting believed she was Petra. He had been told Petra was traveling and had sent a colleague to cover. The intermediary was not a careful person by nature. He was a person who trusted the framework he operated in because it had never failed him, and that trust was the gap Owen was using. They entered the restaurant from the side door. The manager was not present this evening, which was not an accident. The table in the far corner was already prepared. Owen stayed near the entrance, positioned where he could see the room. Mara walked to the table. The associate was already there. He was a compact man, perhaps 50, with the careful, neutral expression of someone who had learned to give nothing away at first meeting. He looked at her as she approached. He said the opening phrase in the dialect, the greeting that was also a test, and she answered it correctly, and his expression did not change, but something in his shoulders released slightly. She sat down. She had her earpiece in the right ear. Owen's voice was a low, steady presence, giving her the context he had, naming the things to listen for. Cole arrived 11 minutes later. He was not what she had expected. She had built a picture of him from the file and from everything Owen had told her, and the picture had edges, had sharpness. The real Cole was smaller, thinner. He had a quality of stillness that was different from Owen's stillness. Owen's stillness came from control. Cole's came from absence. He sat at the table and looked at the space slightly past each person, as if he were present in the room only in the most technical sense. He spoke to the associate. The associate answered. She translated. Her voice was even, and she kept the pace steady, and she did not think about Danny, or about what was at stake, or about anything, except the words in the air between them, and how they sounded, and what they meant. 20 minutes into the meeting, Cole said something specific. He said a name and a location and a sequence, not all at once, across 4 sentences. But she caught each piece and she held them carefully in the part of her mind that functioned like a recording. In her earpiece, Owen's voice said quietly, "Got it." She kept translating. The meeting continued for another 15 minutes. Cole was efficient. He did not linger. He had said what he came to say and exchanged what he needed to exchange, and when he stood to leave, he looked at her for the first time directly. She held his gaze. He looked for 2 seconds, then he looked away and left. She sat at the table while the associate finished his coffee. She matched his pace. She kept her posture relaxed. She did not let anything in her body say hurry. When she left the restaurant 12 minutes later and turned left on the pavement as Owen had told her, and then left again into the side street where a car was waiting with its engine already running, she found that her hands were completely steady. She got in the car. Owen was already in the front seat. The car moved. "The name and location," she said. "I heard it," he said. "Every word." She looked out the window. The city moved past, lit and ordinary. "Is it enough?" she said. He did not answer immediately. He was looking forward, his face lit intermittently by the passing lights. When he spoke, his voice was level, but had something in it she had not heard before, a fine wire of tension released. "It is enough," he said. She closed her eyes. For the first time in a very long time, the number she had been counting down without admitting she was counting down shifted. 3 years, 2 years and 11 months. Every month a subtraction and then a standstill. She had stopped letting herself imagine the end of it. She let herself imagine it now, just for the length of a few city blocks, sitting in the back of a car going somewhere she did not yet know. Then she opened her eyes. "What happens next?" she said. "We verify," Owen said. "We secure the documentation, and then we put it in the hands of people who cannot be bought." "How do you know they cannot be bought?" she said. "Because they have already been offered the amount that would buy them," he said, "and they declined." She thought about that. It was not a reassuring answer in the way she might have wanted, but it was an honest one, and she had decided somewhere in the last 3 days that honest answers from Owen were worth more than comfortable ones from anyone else. "And Cole?" she said. Owen was quiet for a moment. "Cole," he said, "will no longer be anyone's problem." She did not ask what that meant. She had understood the world Owen moved in well enough by now to know that this sentence meant something more complete than a legal resolution, and she had decided, somewhere she could not precisely locate in herself, that she was not going to ask him to be something he was not. Danny was in a room with a number on the door. He had been there for 3 years for something he had not done. There was a document that proved it. Whatever needed to happen to get that document into the right hands was what needed to happen. She had made her peace with that. 11 days. She returned to the apartment, and the first thing she did was clean the rust-colored mark from the kitchen floor. Then she sat at the table and did not do anything for a while. Then she got up and went to the bedroom and got the photographs from the drawer where she kept them. There were 6 of them. Danny at 17 at the seaside, squinting into the sun. Her parents at a wedding. A picture of the view from the room she had rented during the translation project abroad. All red rooftops and morning light. A small, slightly blurry picture of a dog she had loved when she was 10, which she had carried with her since. She set them on the kitchen table. She looked at them. Then she propped them against the backsplash where she could see them while she worked. It felt strange. She sat with the strangeness. She had gotten used to the idea that photographs on walls were a luxury for people who were certain enough of their place to display evidence of having one. Owen had not taken anything except the information. He had left cleanly, as he promised. She had heard nothing from anyone. The nights were quiet, the building was quiet. She worked during the days, and in the evenings she cooked and watched the news and read. And the routine of her life reasserted itself with a speed that surprised her, as if her ordinary days had simply been waiting just off stage and moved back in the moment the space cleared. On the fourth day after she returned from the restaurant, an email arrived in an account she barely used. It was from an address she did not recognize. 2 random words joined together with a number. The kind of address that meant someone wanted the sender to be unidentifiable. The email was 3 lines long. It said that a review of a specific case had been requested by a newly assigned senior officer. It said that new documentation had come to the attention of the review board. It said that a date for a preliminary hearing would be communicated through proper channels within 60 days. It mentioned no names. It did not need to. Mara read it 3 times. She went to the bathroom and turned the fan on and let herself cry for approximately 4 minutes, which was enough. Then she washed her face and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like a person who had been carrying something very heavy for a long time and had just been told she could set it down. She went back to the kitchen. She made tea. She sat at the table with the photographs where she could see them, and she did not open the laptop or the work files. She just sat there and let the afternoon light move across the kitchen in the slow way afternoon light moves. And she thought about Danny being told, at some point in the next few weeks, that someone was looking at his case again, and she thought about what his face might do when he heard that. She was still sitting there when it got dark. She did not turn the light on immediately. She just sat in the dimming room, the way she had sat in it 11 days ago when it was dark and there was a stranger in her kitchen, and she thought about how much had changed since then, and how much she was still holding, and how both things were true at once. On the 12th day, she was almost asleep when she heard it. Not the door, not the handle, the sound of the fire escape, the particular metal rhythm of someone moving up it. 3 floors, the sound she had been hearing from her bedroom window for 2 years, and knew as well as any sound in the apartment. She sat up. She was still fully dressed. She had developed, in the last 11 days, a habit of not fully undressing before midnight. Not quite. Staying in the half-ready state of someone who does not know what the next knock is going to require. She got up and went to the window. The fire escape outside her bedroom window was empty. She went to the kitchen. The fire escape outside the kitchen window, the one that faced the building across the alley, was not empty. Owen was on it, 3 steps below the window, sitting on the railing in the dark as if this were a reasonable way to spend the 12th night after disappearing from someone's apartment. She opened the window. The air that came in was cold and smelled like autumn and the city, a smell that had no name but that she associated with being here, with this specific place in a life she had built from very little. Owen looked at her. He had something different in his face from anything she had seen there before. He looked, for the first time since she had known him, unguarded, not soft, not uncertain, just present, in a way that did not have the layer of management she had always been aware of, the constant reading and calibrating. He did not say he was sorry for being gone. She did not ask him to. She stepped back from the window. He came through. He stood in her kitchen, and she stood across from it, and neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside the window, the city was doing what it always did, indifferent and lit, and full of its own enormous concerns. The radiator had started its ticking again. The refrigerator hummed. Owen looked at the photographs she had left against the backsplash. He looked at them for a moment without speaking. Then he looked at her. He leaned slightly against the window frame, and he said something. He said it quietly, just barely loud enough, just for her, in this kitchen, at this hour, with no one else to hear it. It was not a confession of feeling, though there was feeling in it. It was not a promise, though it pointed toward something she had not let herself point toward in years. It was a statement about her, about who she was, about what he had seen in her across a handful of days that had been, by any measure, not an ordinary way to meet a person. He said it the way people say things that are true, simply, without performance. He said that she was the most capable person he had ever asked for help from, and that he was aware of what it had cost her, and that he wanted her to know he had not missed any of it. Not the moment in the car when she closed her eyes, not the file she had kept for 3 years alone, not the fact that she had set photographs against the backsplash, which told him she was choosing to stay in her own life rather than step back from it. He said that he did not know what came next. He said that in his experience, the people worth knowing were always the ones who made that uncertainty feel like possibility rather than threat. He said that she was one of those people. He said it in the same voice he used for everything, low and even, with no theatrical weight behind it. He said it the way someone states a fact they have had time to verify. Mara stood in her kitchen and listened to him say it, and something in her, something she had pressed down and compressed and kept behind a panel in the wall of herself for a very long time, opened just slightly. Not fully. She was not someone who opened fully in a moment. That was not who she was, and she did not pretend to be anyone other than who she was. But slightly. She looked at him. "Do you want coffee?" she said. Something moved in his face. Not quite a smile. The nearest thing to one she had seen from him. "Yes," he said. She turned to the counter and put the kettle on. Behind her, Owen sat down at the kitchen table, in the same chair he had sat in 11 nights ago, with the same quality of stillness, except that this time, the stillness was different. It was not the stillness of a man managing a situation. It was the stillness of a man who had, for a few minutes at least, stopped managing anything at all. The kettle began to heat. The photographs sat against the backsplash where she had left them, catching the kitchen light. Danny had a preliminary hearing in 60 days, give or take. She was going to be there. She did not know what else she was going to be. She did not know what the shape of the next months looked like, whether Owen would remain in it, whether the thing she had felt open slightly in herself would find something to open toward, or simply settle back into the controlled, careful life she had built. She was not afraid of not knowing. That, she realized as she set 2 cups on the counter, was perhaps the most changed thing. She had lived for 3 years in the certainty that safety meant not having questions that could not be answered. She had built her routines and her habits, and her locked-twice door around that certainty. She had been wrong. Safety was not the absence of uncertainty. It was knowing what you were willing to risk and why. She knew what she had risked, and she knew why, and she knew, standing in her kitchen at just past midnight, with the kettle heating, and a man sitting at her table who had walked in through the dark 11 days ago and changed the shape of things, that she did not regret a single decision. She poured the coffee. She carried both cups to the table. She sat down across from him. The words he had said a few minutes ago were still sitting in the room, the way things said with real weight tend to sit in a room, taking up space, refusing to dissolve into the ordinary air. She would carry them for a long time. She already knew that. Some words do not let you put them down. She wrapped both hands around the cup. Outside, the city breathed. And for the first time in 3 years, so did she.